Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining us today for our webinar. Before we get started, I guess just a couple of housekeeping items. Oh, I see somebody has their hand in the air. So let me just see if I can figure out who that is. Katie, I'm gonna give you the mic. Katie, yep, go ahead.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, I'm going to put you back on mute now, and I'm going to hope that I can remember how to do all this stuff. Usually Sarah Stalker is here. A lot of you will be familiar with Sarah. She's been a huge support to the adult literacy system for quite some time. And Sarah's internet has conked out on her today. So Stacy has graciously agreed to come in and help me. I think I know a fair amount about adult literacy, but technology, not so much. Okay, so Katie, did you have a question or were you just saying hello?
No, I was just saying hello.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so welcome everybody to the first webinar in our Workforce Workplace Literacy series, taking the pulse on workforce workplace literacy. I'm thrilled that we have Marianne and Shannon here. They are from the interpreting service, and we are very pleased that they were able to join us today to provide increased access for any of our participants who require these services. So thank you very much, Marianne and Shannon. Okay, so my name is Tamara Cottery, and I am the Executive Director of Literacy Link South Central, a literacy and basic skills support organization, and one of 16 regional literacy networks in the province. And it's my pleasure to be delivering today's webinar. While I'm facilitating today, this webinar, as part of a larger deliverable, represents the combined efforts and perspectives of numerous other practitioners and organizations in literacy and basic skills. And I would like to begin by acknowledging them. First of all, we have Gabrielle Lopez from Coalition Ontarienne de Formation des Adultes. Gabrielle, I think you're with us today, which is awesome. Sarah Stalker from Contact North. Janine Agnew-Cata from the Literacy Network of Durham Region. Anne-Marie Wieslowski from Literacy Northwest, who is also on today's webinar and is going to help me by keeping an eye on the chat and hopefully making sure I don't miss anything. Gay Douglas from Literacy Link Niagara, and Lisa Ambai from the Rideau Ottawa Valley Learning Network. We thought we'd get today's webinar started by sharing some working definitions of workforce and workplace literacy. I want you to note that these are not the definitions of workforce and workplace literacy. As I said, please consider them working definitions. You may have different definitions of workforce and workplace literacy at your agency. What's that? You don't have established definitions of workforce and workplace literacy at your agency. Well, that sounds like an opportunity for your next staff meeting. Another opportunity, pause for shameless plug here, is for you to attend our second webinar in this series on November 18th. And that webinar is called, What's Your Stake in Workplace and Workforce Literacy? Our goal for this series of webinars is not to present ourselves as the final authorities on the topics of workforce and workplace literacy. Nor is it our goal to tell LBS practitioners what they should be doing around workforce and workplace literacy. Our goal, rather, is to create some specific times and spaces this year for LBS practitioners to talk about these two important forms of literacy and to encourage each of you, in collaboration with others in your organization, community, sector, or stream, to think about how these specific forms of literacy and how or if you should strengthen your organization with regard to one, the other, or both. So now to our working definitions. Workforce literacy is often referred to as the activities or tasks adult learners need to learn to complete to prepare for the workforce. Workplace literacy is often referred to as activities or tasks that are specific to a particular workplace's documentation and practices. Workplace literacy programs are also often described as taking place on site at an employer's location. The 4-webinar series that we're presenting this year is not a standalone deliverable. It's actually an extension of work that happened last year, work that was spearheaded by Literacy Northwest. The goal of last year's deliverable related to workforce workplace literacy was to acknowledge that many excellent resources have been developed for and within literacy and basic skills programming on the topics of workforce and workplace literacy. But these resources can be difficult to find, or at least to find in one centralized location. The product of last year's deliverable was this resource, a collection of workforce and workplace literacy resources. And I'm going to ask Anne-Marie to put a link or a PDF in the chat if you can, Anne-Marie. And as you can see on the screen, the resources that were selected for this collection were then subdivided into different categories, including assessment, occupational specific curricula, soft skills, etc. Again, it's not an exhaustive list, but if you're not aware of what resources and supports already exist in workplace and workforce literacy, then this resource is a good place to start. Last year's deliverable, as I said, was to develop a collection of workforce and workplace literacy resources. As part of this work, Literacy Northwest initiated a province-wide survey. Certainly their goal was to unearth good workforce and workplace literacy resources, but they also discovered other important themes. As I mentioned, to our knowledge, there are no standard definitions of workforce or workplace literacy, which can make it difficult to talk across programs, communities, streams, and sectors. When it comes to delivering workforce and workplace literacy, we heard from survey respondents that many receive mixed messages. Do LBS agencies have to deliver workplace literacy? If they do, is it a requirement that they do so with core funding? When is a fee-for-service arrangement with an employer acceptable? One of the amazing things about literacy and basic skills is the diversity of learners that we support, and therefore the diversity of the system that exists to serve these learners. Not all LBS agencies are the same. Not all have the same capacity to reach out to employers and participate in workplace literacy delivery, for example. And not all communities are the same. Some have significant numbers of local employers that may require adult literacy support, and others may not. LBS, like any other sector, has its fair share of staff turnover. If there is a considerable gray area between workforce and workplace literacy for those of us who have been in LBS for a long time, what's it like for new LBS staff? So while it can be a bit messy trying to determine definitively what activity is workforce and what activity is workplace, there has been and continues to be a lot of workforce activity in LBS. For example, the vast majority of LBS providers in Ontario identify as serving learners on the employment goal path. In doing so, these LBS agencies are by default engaging in workforce delivery. And over the years, the ministry that funds LBS has shone a spotlight on workplace literacy by making project dollars available. Some of the folks on this call may remember the WEBS initiative, Workforce, Workplace, Equity, and Basic Skills, back in the early to mid 90s. At least that's what I think it stood for. If I'm wrong, Doug or somebody else, you can let me know in the chat. About 15 years later, the ministry that funded LBS encouraged planning boards to engage in workplace literacy. In my area, this resulted in a workplace literacy program in a linen cleaning company. And I think a year or two after that, but still about 10 years ago, LBS agencies could apply for workplace literacy projects. My agency, Literacy Link South Central, did a project with Goodwill Industries, that is with their staff, not their clients. What is perhaps notable about all these examples is that they were projects, not core activity. And like all projects, they came to an end. During the economic downturn in 2007, 2008, maybe it was 2009, I do get lost in the years, adult upgrading and adult literacy also connected with workplaces via adjustment services. Large companies, primarily but not exclusively, manufacturing companies, began to lay off considerable numbers of employees, and some closed down entirely. Some LBS support organizations and some programs were called on to work with adjustment services to support these employees in identifying next steps for skills development and gaining additional skills. And finally, there is the apprenticeship connection. We have long known that there is a considerable connection between LBS and apprenticeship. As the need for apprentices continues to grow, I think we, LBS, will see increasing opportunities to integrate with the apprenticeship system to ensure apprentices have the skills they need to sign on as apprentices, to pass their in-school sessions, and to eventually pass their certificate of qualifications to become journey people. So let's take a moment now to hopefully hear from some of you who are participating in today's webinar. Do you have any examples of working with employers that you'd like to share? Something you might consider workforce that's a little off the beaten path. Please share by either raising your hand or putting your examples in the chat. The more we talk about specific workforce and workplace activities, the more we'll all be able to learn from each other. Okay, so Doug, I see your hand in the air.
There, thank you. There's an example in our region with a community-based program, Tri-County Literacy Council out of Cornwall. And they went and talked with some of the call center companies in their region after we had developed a call center curriculum. And they said, could you please send us the people that did not make it through the interviews, and we'll spend 8 weeks with them and provide them the training through our call center curriculum. And they said, love to. And what we'll do is for every person that completes the 8 weeks, we will re-interview them.
That's amazing. That's a great example, Doug. And I thank you very much for sharing that. Anybody else have any examples that you'd like to share from your own experience or from your community? Please don't be shy, because we're constantly giving ourselves a lack of credit for the work that gets done in LBS. Denise.
Yes, hi. So earlier this year, we actually we partnered with two other agencies in their delivering a soft skills training. So, and these were for future PSWs, right? So that, I mean, they were going into the PSW program, and they took our and they took the soft skills program with us first before going on to college, and then after they were done in college, they were going to go to like an employment agency to help find work. So that was a partnership between 3 different organizations.
Wow, that was all like the trifecta there. You hit the collaboration, the partnerships, soft skills, which is certainly in my area growing in importance, and also sector specific training when you look at personal support workers. So thank you very much for sharing that. Anybody else? I don't like to be a talking head. So whether you use the chat or whether you want to throw your hand in the air, I encourage you to please share your ideas. But okay, I see Anne-Marie, your hand is up. Please go ahead.
Hi, Tamara. Yeah, an example, it goes back several years, but in the Northwest region, one of the underground mines had introduced some new technology for the managers, that's not necessarily their names, but I'll call them managers, that took care of teams underground, and they were shifting to completing their not only time cards, but cards where they actually inputted the amount of explosives they used and how much muck it generated at the end of their shift. So they were reverting to doing this all online on these new devices. So the company reached out to the literacy program in the community and asked if we would be interested in training the managers so that they can in turn teach their employees how to do this underground. And in fact, that's what we ended up doing. We used the computer labs at the Learning Center, made the services available in the evenings so that the managers could come after shift. They gave us some of the devices ahead of time so that we were able to learn what the program was like and what the workers ended up having to do at the end of the day. And then we trained the managers in that, and it was a really successful partnership.
Wow, that sounds incredible. And I love that you touched on, well, you didn't specifically call it digital literacy, but again, I can only speak from my area. But if you want to talk about traction within the workforce and workplace, digital literacy is just gaining in importance all the time. In fact, one of a local economic development office here, the one from London, I'm just going to share the name of this, and Anne-Marie, I'm hoping that maybe you can just make note of it in the chat. But he shared with me a fairly short report called The New Landscape of Digital Literacy. And it actually referenced the PIAC assessment, the international assessment, the most recent one of literacy skills, which was significantly about problem solving in technology-rich environments. I'm used to seeing documents about digital literacy from literacy organizations. I am not accustomed to seeing ones like this that are so focused on business. And even though it's a US report, I will be drawing heavily from it when I look at things like skills development fund applications and other things that I think are important for us to accomplish in our area. So again, it's not a 250-page read. It's only like 18, 19 pages. But again, really speaks to the kind of work that we're talking about today in terms of preparing people for the workforce and for new activities and transitions within the workplace. So thank you, Anne-Marie, for putting that in. I really appreciate it. I'm sure if you guys Google it, you'll find it. If not, contact me if you're interested, and I will certainly provide you with the link. Okay, so some great examples there. Sorry, I just need to multitask here. Okay. All right, well, that was a pretty long intro. But for the rest of today's webinar, we're going to focus on 3 things. Prior to developing our 4 webinar series, we distributed 2 surveys to the LBS field in May of 2021. One survey was developed for LBS agencies, and the other was developed for LBS support organizations. And I'm going to share the results of both surveys with you during the time we have remaining this afternoon. But I'm not just going to share statistical results from the surveys. I've often said, and probably too many times, that context is critical. So we'll be talking about numbers, yes, but I will also be inviting you to think about what these numbers mean and how they might affect current and future opportunities for LBS across the province. So we'll begin with the Literacy and Basic Skills Agency survey results. And there was a total of 36 responses. 31 responses were fully complete and 5 were partially complete. And one of the questions we asked was, were you aware that the Ministry of Labor, Training and Skills Development has a workplace and workforce priority for literacy and basic skills? Okay, so let's have a look at the responses that came back there on the screen. 55.6% of respondents said yes, they were aware of that. But 44.4% were not aware. And it's a priority for the ministry. So maybe you're thinking, so what? What does it matter if LBS practitioners and managers know that workforce workplace is a priority for the Ministry of Labor, Training and Skills Development? Does it really change the way that we do our work? I'm going to give you a second to think about that. And just let you know that this year, as was the case last year, regional literacy networks were asked to document the responses of LBS to this question. Please, well, it's not really a question, sorry, it's more of a statement. Please describe any plans to strengthen the quality of workplace and/or workforce literacy and basic skills delivery in your community. Okay, so my question is, of all the questions that MLTSD could ask regional literacy networks to gather intelligence on, why this one? If you thought you were just going to slumber through today's webinar, then I'm sorry, but I do have a lot of questions for you as participants. So that's my question. It's a priority for the ministry. They specifically want to know how programs are strengthening their ability to deliver workforce and workplace. What is behind that? What do you think is driving that? Okay, sorry, I'm multitasking here. I see Doug's hand in the air. I think I muted you, Doug. Sorry.
Sure. I'll unmute myself. I think that a couple of comments about this, Tamara. The fact that 55.6 said yes, I wonder of that number, who are thinking just workforce, just workplace, or both? Because I think that where we're at now, we're in a position where we're going to, as networks and provincial support orgs, be looking at developing capacity to provide services to workplaces. But I also think that one of the drivers for this is certainly the devastation on the economy of COVID. And I know that some industries are booming, but the industries that are booming are still looking for employees. So workforce training is still crucial.
Thanks, Doug. Couple of key words there for me. One is capacity. And the second, you didn't actually say this word, but I feel it was certainly implied. When you look at those aspects of the labor market that were hit really hard by the pandemic, like hospitality, for example, I mean, what about transferable skills, right? I think there's a role for LBS to play because most people don't think about skills in general on a daily basis, nor do they think about how to transfer those skills to new environments necessarily, or maybe they need a little bit of encouragement in order to think about that. So thank you for sharing those comments. Anybody else want to, sally forth with an opinion on why there's such a focus or an interest in workforce and workplace? Denise. I think you can unmute yourself, can't you?
Oh, there I am. Okay, perfect. So I think other parts of the workforce, like like in restaurants or even in retail, like they're really having, like they're having a hard time even filling those positions, right? So I think there might be a bit of a shift in our labor market, right? Just for new skills or transfer, like as you had mentioned, transferable skills to other things too. So there is a gap, right? We were talking about capacity. I think someone else had mentioned it as well. So, but that's what I was thinking as well. So I also agree with Doug.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Tamara, Tamara, this is Anne Marie. So Maureen had also included in the chat, her comment was that the disconnect between jobs unfilled and the numbers of unemployed.
Yes. And that just made me think of that. Was it Rick Miner report, People Without Jobs, Jobs Without People? Even though that came out a number of years ago, I still think there's a lot of relevance there. So thanks, Maureen. I appreciate that. And I see, Shelley, that you have your hand up.
Hi, I'm just can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I was considering like just reflecting over the past, and in the past, employers haven't really had to look at that training concept as much. They had the pick of the litter, they could access a lot of highly skilled people. And now that seems to be reversing. So they haven't had a lot of training resources at all. And so now when they're short, they're having to look outside of that and realize that, some basic skills are missing. And so when they're trying to get basic people in, they're finding the math skills. And as all the research is showing locally, the math skills, the soft skills, the let's stay here for the full day work, for the full work day kind of skills. So I think the businesses are putting this pressure on the ministry and on our employment services to find these people to fill these spots.
Thank you so much, Shelley. A couple things there. I agree. We all, well, maybe not all, but many of us remember the days when employers could ask for a grade 12 just because they could, whether the job required that level of skill or not. Those same employers today, at least many of them in my area, they've dropped that. That's gone. Right? Again, if you can show up even 3 out of 5 days, they'll take you, right? So employers didn't used to have to really think about training because they could normally recruit people who had the skills that they needed. Well, now they're having to bring in people who may not have all of the skills that are desirable, right? But the employers, they don't necessarily know how to fill those gaps. That's not their area of expertise. So I think that's one issue. And then again, the whole idea of retention, I think LBS has had its head primarily in the workforce preparation game. How do you prepare somebody for employment, right? When it comes to literacy and numeracy skills. But now there may be a whole other wedge there. And I mean wedge in a good way, not in a divisive way, to say, you know what, another way for LBS to get its foot in the door, because it comes down to retention. Right. So if an employer hired somebody who had 70% of the skills that were desirable and 70% is better than zero, right? If you have production quotas and things that you have to do as an employer, who's going to provide the other 30%? It's not to say that any of the LBS programs or support orgs on this call have to fill that gap. I want to make that really clear. Today is not a sales pitch for why everybody should drop what they're doing and run and meet the needs of employers. I think there are some systemic issues that need to be addressed before that becomes a reality. But all I'm saying is that I think there are increasing numbers of opportunities. So, how we respond to those, if we can respond to those, that's something to consider. Doug, do you want to throw some?
Just to add on to what you're saying, Tamara, and I completely agree with you. I think the other thing is that what we need to do is start having discussions with employers about transferable skills, because there are a lot of very skilled people that may be coming in, but they're fitting a job description. And if we kind of got rid of or expanded some of the ideas around, let's use all of the skills you bring to this job, and then we'll create a job description for you.
Excellent. Thanks, Doug. Any other comments on this before I move ahead? Okay, I see people are using the chat, and I really appreciate that, because it's just another way for us all to augment our knowledge. Okay. There we go. All right, I know that this is a busy slide. So for those of you who can read everything quickly and absorb it, that's fantastic, but I'm going to summarize it in a couple of statements here. Essentially, we're asking LBS agencies how effective they feel in different aspects of workforce and workplace literacy. So what we can see here in a summary is that LBS providers feel they're more effective at delivering or developing workforce literacy services than workplace literacy services. Also, LBS providers feel that they're more effective at navigating challenges related to workforce literacy than they are workplace. That is not really surprising to me at all. I mean, LBS agencies spend far more time in the workforce realm than they do the workplace. But again, there could be some opportunities. There are some opportunities. I know that because I've been talking to employers over the last couple of weeks in our region. And boy, what would have been a tough sell probably 5 years ago, now I'm seeing I actually will use the word excitement. I'm seeing excitement by these employers about the prospect of somebody helping them to navigate the different upgrading and educational systems to provide their workforce with more skill. So, okay. So now we have a slide on context. What issues or concerns does your agency have about workplace versus workforce literacy? Here we see again that the difference between them is not clear. Some respondents indicated they are uncertain what resources to use. Well, that may be the easiest issue or concern to address. Again, if you haven't seen it and you're not certain what resources to use, please check out the collection of workforce and workplace literacy resources. Okay, Denise, I think you might need to put yourself on mute, or maybe I can do that. Oh, I have a lot of power as the co-host here. Okay. All right. So there is a section in there on assessment in case you're wondering how assessment for workforce and workplace differs or may be distinct from assessing for other goal paths. Other respondents noted that it's challenging to balance core programming with workplace. Some LBS agencies use core programming to address workplace needs. Some will do workplace activity, but on a fee-for-service basis, because they're already meeting targets and they require additional resources to meet additional needs. So here's a question. It's rhetorical. Should all LBS agencies be expected to engage in workplace literacy? Or perhaps there are some agencies that see employer needs and want to meet these needs, but they just don't have the capacity. And by that, I mean the time and resources to develop the necessary partnerships. We all know that partnerships don't grow on trees, right? They need time and they need energy to address. And we also know that a lot of people have indicated that they definitely want additional staff training when it comes to feeling like they will be confident enough to move into the workplace. We asked LBS agencies to share successes they've had in delivering workplace and workforce, and if they have developed any best practices. As I mentioned, it can be time intensive to develop relationships with employers. So collaborating and working with employment services, most notably job developers, and Skills Advance Ontario projects can be effective. Over the past 10 years, there's been a significant increase in short modular training that is quite specific to the workplace. Modules on health and safety, food services, retail, and customer service, for example. We've also seen an increase in more generic workforce and workplace skills, such as soft skills, self-esteem, and essential skills for the workplace. The development and delivery of shorter modular programming is also a bit of a balancing act for some LBS agencies, particularly those that work with learners who have lower levels of literacy skills. Such LBS learners typically stay in programming longer than those who just need to brush up on their math, say, before moving on to post-secondary programming. However, some LBS agencies offer shorter modular programming to employment services or Ontario Works clients, as well as learners who are already in the program. And last but not least, I sometimes have the vision in my mind of LBS practitioners sitting by the phone and hoping it will ring and an employer will be on the other end. We certainly hope that employers will see value in adult upgrading and skills development. I would say, though, that there are quite a few instances in which employers have picked up the phone and contacted an LBS provider because they, the employer, has noted the need to develop skills among employees. They might not pick up the phone and say, hey, do you have a workplace literacy project underway that I could be a part of? They might have noticed 1 or 2 or 3 employees who are struggling. So I'd like to take a second. I know that we have a mixture of support organizations and LBS programs on today's webinar. So I'd love to hear some specific examples of times when employers have reached out to you. And you don't have to name the employer because I know that there are confidentiality issues, but if you wouldn't mind sharing, that would be amazing. Doug, is your hand up newly or is that from before? Oh, I guess it was from before.
it was from before, but I will relate a story.
Okay.
There was a time, you've mentioned this already, Tamara, when the LBS networks and the local workforce development boards had a project together. And in our area, what we did was we were introduced to employers we were taken to employers to introduce literacy and basic skills services to them. And I remember going to a manufacturing company in Brockville. And when I spoke with the manager, I explained what literacy and basic skills could do and how could we maybe help some of your current employees, that kind of stuff. He said, I wish I knew about you 2 years ago. We had apprentices who were struggling and they ended up not getting their apprenticeship. So I think that we may not necessarily be getting the calls ourselves, but we do want to make sure that we're working closely with employment services, especially again, the workplace developers, but also our local boards.
Thanks, Doug. A couple of really good resources there for sure. Now, Shelley, I don't want to call you out, but I know of a particular employer who did recently contact us. Would you like me to share that example or would you like to share it?
I was just typing it in the chat. One more word. One more word.
Sorry. Well, you can still put it in the chat as reinforcement, you know?
I think this is the one you're talking about.
Yeah,
so we've been in touch with an employer who actually, surprisingly, their staff shared with them that they were having some challenges meeting their bills and meeting rent and things like that. So that was the biggest surprise, was that people would step forward, because in the past, if we've ever tried to do a manage your money and financial literacy and all of those sorts of things, it's a really tough sell to get people in. So this was really nice. And the challenge, of course, is going to be, can we have it? They were hoping to have it at their site, but now they've found out that some of the spouses might want to join as well. So we're going to try to have it at our site in our big gym space with safe distancing and everything. So yeah, so that's been very encouraging. And they're actually going to pay them for the first hour. We're going to do like 2-hour stints, and they're going to companies paying them for the first hour.
Wow, I haven't heard about that model in quite some time, that sort of half and half contribution. So that's fantastic. And that same company is interested in pursuing other opportunities as well. So I see, Val, you've put something in the chat about an employer, a partnership with an employer. Would you mind telling us about that? Because I love that you've identified the partners, and if you're comfortable telling us a little bit about the nature of the partnership, that'd be cool. And while Val may or may not be trying to figure out how to get her microphone activated, I just want to acknowledge something from Patricia here, talking about the service system manager, that there's incentive for employment service providers to refer clients and learners to shorter, more focused training as opposed to longer or indefinite learning opportunities. So true. Patricia, I'm going to ask you to maybe hang on to that and mull it over a bit more, because eventually we're going to talk a little bit more about the service system managers. Val, is there something that you can share, or maybe you don't have access to your microphone, in which case you'll have to leave us all in suspense? Okay. All right. Any other Anne-Marie Wazlowski. Go ahead, Anne-Marie.
Okay, just really quickly, as a regional network, we have received calls from throughout the region asking us questions about specific services that would be available. And then as a network, we would refer the caller to an agency in the region that we think could best meet their needs. But we had a call about 3 weeks ago from Fort Severn, and there isn't an LBS agency up there. And it was with within the community's little economic development Development Office, and they wanted to develop something so that they could provide financial literacy training to their community. And again, as I stated, there is no LBS agency there, so we've been connecting them with a lot of financial literacy resources and made referrals such as to ABC Life Literacy, because they have a program, and or connecting them with eChannel, LBS programming on eChannel.
Very cool. Thanks, Anne-Marie, for sharing. And I see that Heather has shared in the chat, we worked with an aircraft repair refurbishing painting company who was having trouble with staff not understanding how to complete documents and forms that were required on the job. I mean, what diversity, right? I mean, in terms of the different things that people are being asked to support employers with. And Heather further added, we went on site to work with employees and in the process developed some great curriculum activities to use offsite with others as well. That is very interesting because I think sometimes it's really hard for, well, maybe often it's difficult for LBS agencies to have the capacity to go out and to work with employers. But what I think I'm hearing from your comment, Heather, is that it wasn't just an investment that paid off for that particular employer, that you were able to use that information in other ways, which I think is cool. Okay, very cool. And Maureen, the story Doug shared is not unusual. It would be helpful if apprenticeship liaisons ensured individuals were connected to supports at sign up. Wow, we are learning a lot about this. When I say we, I mean the support orgs around the province. Slowly but surely, we are putting out, I was going to say tentacles, but that made it sound like a kraken, and that's not a positive image. We're putting out tendrils, right, to apprenticeship systems in general to look at how we can make those connections and make them sooner. And just one other example I want to add, because I know we only have a certain amount of time, is I remember one of our community-based agencies once, we got a phone call from just an individual. It wasn't the employer. It was a person who was working, who worked for a window and door installation company and really wanted to improve his skills. And so we made the connection with a local program. He signed on, and oh my goodness, talk about word of mouth. I think within 3 weeks, they had 7 more people from the same company, right, who were all looking to upgrade their skills. So the need is definitely out there. And kind of what I find heartbreaking about workplace literacy is that every employer that I reach out to, they've never heard of LBS. Never. And you think, wow, like I've been doing this for 25 years. You feel like you do a lot to try to raise awareness, but we just don't have enough reach, right? So maybe through collaboration, through working with other partners, whether it's planning boards or service system managers, we have to get the word out there, right? And then you kind of think, well, gosh, what if the word does get out there and then suddenly everybody wants to access the services? Will it be in a whole other pickle? Sue, I see you have your hand up. I'm sorry if I didn't see that earlier. Sue, are you there? Okay, well, Sue, if you do want to share something, you can either do so in the chat. Oh, you are there. Okay, can you access your microphone? Oh, maybe it's me. I have to allow you to talk.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I was
Sorry.
I didn't know how to speak. I knew how to speak, but I didn't know how to make the sound. So maybe this is already out there, but Tamara, you speak so wonderfully about all of this LBS stuff. And I'm wondering, would it be something that, we could have like a little video of you talking about what we can offer an employer so that we can, once we've made or been in touch with an employer, we can say, listen, we can send you this video and you can look at it. It's only a few minutes and it'll help you understand what we can do for you. Because I find that there's so much information and I end up with all kinds of pieces of paper and saying, oh, we can do these essential skills and, all that kind of stuff. And it's just, I don't know. I think they get, they don't understand it all.
Well, first of all, I'll say flattery is so effective. So it's funny because right now, Doug and I are working on what we hope will be an application to sort of do workplace literacy 3.0, right? And so in working with the local employers, it's a process, right? You reach out to them, you ask if they're interested. And but actually in this case, and a little spoiler alert for later in the presentation, our workforce planning board they participate in the employer one survey. So they send employers a series of questions every year. And I think over the last 3 to 5 years, they've asked more questions. I mean, they've been collaborating with us and very, very good at reaching out to us as an LBS support org and asking, what else they should be asking of employers. So this time I was actually able to go through a list, and I would show you this spreadsheet if it wasn't so ridiculous. It's like 3 feet by 4 feet of the employers who said, yeah, I would like to know more about adult upgrading programs. And so I've been reaching out to those folks, and they even indicated what area they think that their clients are struggling in. So is it reading? Is it writing? Is it document use? Is it digital literacy? Is it communication skills, teamwork? And so I was able to then follow up with them in quite a specific way to say, I'm aware that you're interested in finding out information about X, Y, and Z. So those folks who have said, yeah, I'm interested in being a part of a project. Of course, you never want to make employers do extra work. They just don't have the time. I need letters of support. So I draft them. I look them up, I talk to the employers, and I find that specific information. And then I've kind of identified 6 or 7 areas that I feel like in general, adult literacy can support. So I love your idea. I will have to talk to some of my other support work partners to see. I know making a video has become fairly easy for those who have the skills. But anyway, I appreciate the suggestion, Sue, and we'll do what we can to follow up on it. So thank you. Okay, I better keep moving and grooving here. All right. So we also asked LBS agencies what workforce and workplace delivery challenges they have experienced. So some noted that it can be challenging to access the resources. Again, broken record, check out the collection and see if it suits your needs. However, if you've already reviewed the collection and you still feel that you can't find the resources that you need to assist you, maybe it's a video like Sue said, please contact us and let us know. If there's a gap of this nature, we certainly want to know about it. And as support organizations, it's our job to support our LBS agencies. Okay. Other respondents noted English as a second language barriers. Employers may contact an adult literacy program for what is actually an English as a second language issue. I think we can also recognize that there is a gray area between English as a second language and LBS. What if employees have been in Canada for 10 years, they can speak English well enough, but they struggle significantly with writing English? Is that LBS? Is that English as a second language? And if it really is an English as a second language issue, whose job is it to connect an employer to English as a second language programming? How much work does that take an LBS agency when you don't get any credit for that kind of coordination? I don't really expect people to answer those questions, but I think these are some of the issues that exist that stymie some of the efforts that we would otherwise be making. And we often hear that employers have a different perspective and that time is money. Most employers have at least one eye on making profit, so it can be difficult to get their time and attention and to get them to buy in. If an employer does buy into the idea of skills development, there's often a need to inform the employer as to realistic timeframes. For example, a 2-hour webinar will not be enough to teach an employee how to fill out documents properly and accurately. So some employers do want the quick fix. Not only do they want a quick fix, but they'd ideally like it to be tomorrow. So when an employer finally does buy in, they often expect you to deliver right away. And if an LBS program has to shuffle staff or find somebody new to deliver, these just-in-time expectations can be very unrealistic. We've also discussed the time and effort it takes, not just to build relationships, but to maintain them. And last but not least, LBS requirements don't always lend themselves to delivery in the workplace. Our literacy and basic skills requirements in terms of paperwork, milestones, culminating task administration, etc., don't always seem like a good fit in the workplace. So again, we still have work to do, right? In terms of generating interest is one thing, but there are some other hurdles to overcome. So we asked literacy and basic skills agencies what kind of topics they'd like to see addressed in future training, workshops, and webinars. So one respondent said, how to convince learners of the importance. Well, I think in this case, the respondent was talking about workforce. How do you convince learners of the importance of workforce literacy development? So I found this to be an interesting question in light of service system managers and the new focus of Ontario Works on life stabilization. Other respondents noted a desire for more professional development on apprenticeship math and how to develop focused curriculum if such curriculum doesn't already exist. And we also saw a theme related to digital literacy, how to teach online to learners with lower levels of literacy, as well as the need to increase the digital skills of practitioners. A few more items that were identified for professional development: employer needs analysis. So this is often referred to, and Doug, I think you're much more of an expert on this than I am, but the organizational needs assessment. How do you market, sector-specific training, etc. And last but not least, balancing training for work with training for life. So this was an interesting comment that I remember reading about specifically, and it caught my attention then, as it is now, in that I think sometimes some LBS practitioners have a bit of a philosophical challenge, right? With the idea of just teaching somebody to do the minimal tasks that are required for a particular job. So I'll use the example of, maybe an employer contacts an agency because they have an employee who can't recognize the names of vegetables on the sides of boxes. And therefore that employee has difficulty loading, unloading, stacking, and organizing those boxes of vegetables. So in some ways, it kind of doesn't seem like a reasonable solution to just teach somebody the names of vegetables. It kind of reminds us of the saying, if you teach a man, if you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. If you teach a man to fish, he'll eat for life, right? And I think that's sort of the nature of the challenges that some LBS practitioners are feeling when it comes to this whole workplace literacy idea. Okay, and we asked LBS agencies if they had any other final comments that they wanted to share. And the suggestions, as you can see, are on the screen here. Encourage more blended learning with e-channel. So, I'm not sure if that's in conjunction with workforce or workplace, but again, as the light on skills development gets brighter and brighter, we're going to need to figure out even better ways of working with each other and utilizing every aspect of our adult literacy system so that we can try to meet these needs. There's a vast difference in knowledge from one practitioner to another. Yeah, there is. I mean, if you don't have a lot of experience in workplace, it can seem very overwhelming. However, and I can't remember if I talk about this later, so please forgive me if I do. Our second webinar in this series is slated for November 18th, the What's Your Stake in Workforce Literacy. And I think that it will be good for folks to hear from Doug Noyes, who's going to be a part of that presentation, who's attending today, because he sees some similarities between what LBS practitioners do on a daily basis, and how they might be able to talk about transferable skills, transfer those skills into a workplace. So I think it will be very interesting food for thought. Some other people queried, what are the future expectations related to workplace and a workforce? I don't have a crystal ball, but I can't see them diminishing. In fact, I can only see it increasing, which is not to say that the other pathways are not also very important, because they are. So, and then lastly, the importance of clear language in the workplace. So yes, I was actually pitching this as part of the what can we do for you when I'm talking to employers? Because I say sometimes it's not a matter of bringing in training. There may be things that we can do as an adult literacy community to make some of your current resources easier to use. I think about health and safety. So I just try to, if that's an easier way to get your foot in the door for a workplace, because it's not about arranging schedules and all that sort of thing, then that can be a good idea. And obviously making health and safety information more clear and therefore more likely to be followed. I think there's a lot of merit in that. Okay, so we're going to move on now to the literacy and basic skills support organization results. So I want to make it clear at this point in time that these were questions that were asked of the literacy and basic skills support organizations, not about them. Okay, so what you're about to hear are the responses from the support organizations themselves. Okay, so we had 11 complete surveys, 3 partial surveys, and that survey occurred in June, I think, of 2021. Before I get too far ahead of myself, I shouldn't make assumptions talking about new staff that everybody knows what the support organizations are. So there's a little bit of a summary here. So we have 16 regional literacy networks. We have 4 sectoral organizations. So LLO is Law Back Literacy Ontario, CLO, Community Literacy of Ontario. They work with community-based organizations. We have KESBA, which I think stands for Continuing Education for School Board Administrators, but they look at the school board sector. And I put ACE here, and I shouldn't have. It should be the College Sector Committee because they work with the college level programs. In addition, we have 3 streams, and these are provincial organizations as well. We have Deaf Literacy Initiative for the deaf and deafblind programs. We have COFA, as I mentioned earlier, Gabrielle Lopez is with us today for the Francophone programs. And we have the Ontario Native Literacy Coalition for the Indigenous programs. We also have 2 technological support organizations in Alpha Plus and Contact North. And I don't mean to leave out Centre Fora. And Gabrielle, if you're still with us, I would really love it if you could put something in the chat to describe, I think of Centre Fora as a publishing house / translation service. But I might not be doing that justice. So if you choose to correct me, that is a-okay. Okay, so a quick question for those of you. I see some people have had to leave. But what role do support organizations play in supporting workforce and workplace literacy? I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but let's just throw out some ideas, whether you want to do that in the chat or whether you'd like to raise your hand. Because what I want to get at here is that support organizations are different animals than LBS agencies, right? So I think it's important for the distinction between them to be noted and understood. But as somebody who's worked for a networking organization for a very long time, I realize it's not always clear. So what do you think support organizations do when it comes to supporting workforce and workplace literacy? Any ideas? I know there are some support orgs on here, so I feel like I see a hand up, but I can't tell who it is. Oh, Doug, please go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. I think I see our role, at least as an LBS network, to be the liaison between employers and the LBS service providers in our region, but also we could also be the liaison between workforce development boards and employers, employment services and employers, et cetera, et cetera. So I think if our LBS service providers, I know you guys are swamped, you've got lots going on, but what we may be able to do is go out and make those connections and do the marketing on your behalf.
That really plays into the concept of being a network, right? I mean, we are not inundated with clients the way that programs are. And so our role can be a little different. So thank you, Doug, for mentioning that. And I thought I saw another hand up earlier. Was that you, Anne Marie, or am I making that up?
No, that was me, and I was just actually typing in chat. But I mean, Doug's description was pretty much bang on what I was going to say. I just used the word more as act as intermediaries between LBS and other stakeholder organizations in attempts to connect with employers or identify employers' needs.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. Again, it's that relationship piece. Relationships, they take time to develop and nurture, and it just doesn't happen if you don't invest, right? But in order to invest, you have to have people to be able to go and create and maintain those relationships. So I see there are a couple of suggestions also. Jill said, create documents and resources that LBS agencies don't have the capacity to create. Thank you. Anne-Marie, I think I'm losing track of the chat. So am I missing anything here?
No, I've been keeping an eye on it, and I mean, I'm not going to report when people are saying that they need to leave, but
Okay, that's fair. Promoting collaboration between agencies in the same region. Yep, thanks. Thanks very much, Heather. Intermediaries, yep. And a couple of other ideas, curriculum development and professional development. Okay. Doug, is your hand up newly or is that from before?
From before.
Okay, no worries. Just didn't want you to think I was ignoring you. Okay. So we asked support organizations how effective they feel at assisting programs with understanding the difference between workforce and workplace literacy, because there seems to be a fair amount of confusion or a lack of clarity in the field about this. But it was interesting to me that 64% feel they're effective and the rest of the respondents felt like they're somewhat effective. So I think there's an area to explore there still, because I do feel there's a bit of a disconnect between the responses from the agencies and how we as support orgs feel we're doing in this regard. But I'll be honest, I don't have any answers right here and right now. So we asked the support organizations how effective they feel they are in promoting literacy and basic skills to local Skills Advance Ontario projects. So first of all, it might be worth identifying what a Skills Advance Ontario project is. I think they were first introduced in 2016, 2017, and I'm using my own words here, but Skills Advance Ontario projects emerged to meet local labor market demands for a particular sector. They're short-term programs that build job seekers' foundational, soft, and technical skills and involve a placement with employers who are looking to hire. The other main feature of Skills Advance Ontario projects is that they have considerable wraparound supports associated with them to support job seekers in their learning, in their placement, and I believe for up to a year once they're hired by an employer. So not all support organizations have direct relationships with Skills Advance projects, as such projects are local or regional for the most part. So support orgs with more of a provincial scope may not see this question as applicable to them. And close to 35% of support orgs feel they are not effective or somewhat effective in promoting literacy and basic skills to local Skills Advance Ontario projects. So here's a question. Why would that even be important for LBS and Skills Advance Ontario projects to know about each other and interact with each other? Let's see, Sue.
I know this is probably not a question, but I can answer it anyway. It is important because if there is an SAO project in your area and they don't know about LBS, which I feel is already a disconnect when, you know, why wouldn't they? We're all funded by the same ministry. But what happens is they end up going outside of their local area. So in our case, there was an SAO project that, and we're here, and even one of our board members was involved in it after the fact, unfortunately, but they ended up going to Good Learning Anywhere for their online training for their clients. And we ended up training people outside of our area online for another project. So it was really mixed up. That we should have been doing the Renfrew County one and someone else should have been doing maybe the Ottawa one, right? But Skills Advance Ontario had no idea that we were sitting right here in their county. So it is really important and really want them to know who we are. Thank you.
Doesn't it seem like the fate of LBS sometimes to be constantly overlooked? Like always the
Honest.
bridesmaid, never the bride, not even a bridesmaid. I'm not even sure we're in the chapel at all at times, but yeah, certainly
I-
work to be done there.
I really think that a lot of things fall to LBS to explain who we are and be out there explaining what we can do, even with our own ES partners. It falls to LBS to be the ones to say, okay, this is what we can do for you, rather than it falling to maybe employment services or an SAO that they understand what we do. It should be the other way around. Like, this is who is in your area. We're all funded by the same person or the same, ministry. You should know who your partners are.
Yeah, that coordination at the policy level would be fantastic. I see
Yes.
Doug has his hand up and Shelley.
Yeah, there have been a couple of examples in the Leo region of SAO projects that have been awarded to local training boards. And part of the SAO project is to provide training, and it's occupational curriculum based. It's the same thing that our LBS agencies do in that community. And they have not been invited to provide the training. So I have concerns about that. I've certainly spoken with the ministry about that, but that's a real disconnect. And it's also funding wise, I'm not sure it's a good use of the funds. When you've already got a program that could provide the training funded by the same ministry.
Yeah, we don't want to see competitive streams of foundational training in the same community funded by the same ministry, right? That doesn't make any sense. Shelley.
Yeah, just to back up what Doug was saying, it's just really frustrating to see that it takes so little effort for a company to come forward and say, we need this. And then the ministry quickly looks at fee for service training sometimes. And like, we don't even hear anything about it. So it's not the ministry mandating that, look, company, I'm sorry you aren't aware of what's going on in the community, or you're not aware of your trainers, but here are some trainers. We'll connect with them and we'll see what they can provide. Like, just doing that little bit of work within the ministry itself would just be so wonderful, because it takes everybody by surprise when they show up, and it's fast and furious and expensive, especially when they know nowadays where with COVID, there's so many issues with all of us trying to reach our numbers and, serve people, safe distancing and all of that, that you'd think our own ministry would say, these guys are more than capable of supporting you on this.
Yeah, use the existing capacity within the systems that you already fund, right? And the last thing I'll say about Skills Advance Ontario projects, and Doug, I will come back to you if you have another comment, is, they are growing in numbers kind of exponentially. For something that started in, I think, 2016, 2017, I might be off by a year. I think there are close to 80 of them around the province now. Okay, 80 different Skills Advance Ontario projects. Okay, I don't want to curb conversation here. Shelley and Doug.
Tamara,
Yes.
Tamara, it's Anne Marie, just so that we don't lose sight of the chat. So there were a couple of questions or comments posted in regards to this. Michael posted that LBS can provide the pre and post essential skills assessments that are a requirement of SAO, and or also pre-SAO targeted training. So there's some missed opportunities there as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Anne Marie. And I see Sue. I mean, this is one of the reasons why doing these webinars is so important. I thought I'm not alone, right? I mean, because you're not alone, and we are all struggling through some similar issues, also seeing some amazing successes. So let's not lose sight of the positives, but no, you are absolutely not alone. Okay, I want to keep my eye on the clock as well. So, oh, sorry, I realized when I changed my screen around, you all see it. All right. So the next question we asked is, how effective do you feel your organization's relationship is with your local workforce planning and development board? So it's probably important to note here that some support orgs may not feel they have a direct relationship with planning and development boards because they are regional in nature and not provincial. So that's understandable. And some LBS networks have a single workforce planning and development board, while others have more than one that covers the same geographical area. It's good to see that none of the support orgs feel their relationship with their local planning and development board is not very effective. Because as we've already discussed today, there are many good reasons to be connecting with your planning board. And we're going to talk about a couple more as we proceed here. So next up, the service system manager. Okay. So we did ask the support orgs how effective they felt at promoting the role of LBS to the local service system manager. So let's start with what is a service system manager, or an SSM as they are often referred to. You may have heard that employment services are undergoing a transformation. So the ministry is now taking a service system manager approach. And there are 3 prototype communities in Ontario where the SSM model has been implemented. And one such area is in the region of Niagara, Hamilton, Brant, Haldimand, and Norfolk. A single organization, in this case FedCap, has been awarded the contract to oversee all employment services in the region. And at present, LBS has not been included in the transformation. So why would it even matter if LBS support organizations were promoting the role of LBS to the local service system manager? SSMs aren't even responsible for literacy and basic skills. So why would this matter? Any thoughts? Why should we care if SSMs know about adult literacy? Michael. Oh, maybe I didn't give you the, can you talk now?
Okay, can you hear
Good.
me now?
Yep.
Transformations has in our area, at least, I'm not going to speak for the other 2, has had significant impact on LBS. The fact that we're not included under the SSM is irrelevant. The fact that the system around us has been transformed or is under transformation directly has impact on our programs, because we work every day with those affected agencies, whether they're employment services, and of course, Ontario Works. So since this is one of the things that I'm trying to untangle, and the pandemic has made it very difficult, because as we've all experienced a drop in our numbers, we've seen some patterns that I'm hoping to be able to establish that demonstrate that transformations actually had maybe as much of an impact as the pandemic in terms of our relationship and service coordination with those 2, with employment services and OW. OW no longer makes referrals to us, practically 0.
Yep.
And now ES is getting all those referrals, and a lot of our folks, and I always have to, caveat here is I'm not being critical. This is just a lot of change that everybody's trying to figure out. And internally, they're trying to figure this out. So how is it they're possibly going to work with us to make sure that they get those folks to us to support them as part of their employment action plan, or even understand that working in a short-term LBS program can be a positive addition to an employment action plan as they move them towards an actual job. So this has taken a heck of a lot of work. We're actually moving to more of a case management approach, where we try to have someone represent LBS at each employment service agency a couple times a month as part of their case management meetings to make sure that they are aware of where we can support. We're offering our help. We're actually putting our hands out and saying, What can we do for you? How can we help? Because we understand that they're under a lot of pressure.
I feel
In
like
some
that's a whole
cases, we're
session
having
of
some-
itself.
We're having some success in some areas, Tamara, and others it's nothing, silence. And my favorite part is, can you remind us what it is you do? I'm sure I'm not the only one that has experienced that, because you go to all these LSPs and sadly, so it comes down to, I would bet folks that aren't in an SSM yet, build those relationships now. If you haven't got them as firm as you think you might need. I mean, personal relationships, frontline workers, not just managers and EDs. And hopefully that transition will be a lot smoother for those that are yet to come.
Thanks, Michael, because there are more to come, right? I don't know how closely everybody's keeping eye on the rolling out of the service system managers, but I think all but maybe 2 areas of the province, the North and Toronto, are slated to start soon. Doug, you had your hand up, and then Anne Marie.
Just a quick point. Thank you, Michael. That was great. But my biggest concern, I sit on a committee that is thinking about applying to be an SSM for our region. And every time I'm on there, my biggest concern is we have spent years developing great relationships with employment services. And my concern is when they are no longer managed directly by the same ministry we are, I'm concerned that those relationships could break down and/or we're going to have to start all over again. So that's my concern. I'm not saying that LBS should be under an SSM. Oh God, no, thank you.
Yes, thanks very much for that, Doug. I concur. And we're back to relationships. You know, we don't exist in a vacuum. And Michael, that was a big takeaway for me from what you were saying, is that, you know, why should we care about what's going on in the service system manager world? Because it's affecting all of our partners very significantly, right? And therefore it's affecting a lot of people and potential clients significantly. Anne Marie, do you have your hand up?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, just again, the chat. So Jill had commented that it's important for us to have the connection because we need to understand how best SSMs need to understand how best to make referrals to LBS agencies for clients who would benefit. And Valerie noted that it's also important because of linkages with ES, especially important for workforce workplace literacy, knowing the employers.
Thanks, Anne Marie. Okay, now, next thing I wanted to talk about with regard to workforce workplace literacy is how do LBS programs use local labor market information? Okay, it's pretty open-ended. Just wanted to get this conversation started about LMI, or local labor market information. Anybody want to share? I know what we've done with it as a support org, but I'm curious from a program perspective or other support orgs, how you might be using it. I apologize, Anne Marie. I don't know if your hand is newly up or if I'm just picking on you now, so. Nope, you stuck it down. Okay. All right. I don't know if that's a sign that people are getting tired and it's too many questions, Tamara. So I'm going to persevere here because I know we're also getting short for time. Okay. So another potential role for LBS support organizations is integrating local labor market information into the literacy service planning process, which might seem kind of weird because as programs, of course, you would probably are using LMI or local labor market information to determine, you know, curriculum resources that you might be using within your organization. But I also think it's important that we are identifying these linkages within our literacy service planning reports and the process that we use. So most LBS support organizations feel they're doing this effectively, 71.4%. So the reason why I think it's important is because honestly, I don't know who exactly reads literacy service planning reports, but that's my opportunity to brag and point paint a picture every year about not just the ways in which LBS is serving and is supporting clients and other initiatives that are funded through the Ministry of Labor, Training and Skills Development, but also where those linkages should be made, but they don't yet exist. And again, I think it was Michael, maybe you said the point is not to be critical. The point is to identify opportunities and try to identify them in a way that helps decision makers understand that without these more direct linkages being made at the local, regional, and provincial level, it leaves the rest of us to sort of do the best we can with what we have. And that is just not ideal, in my opinion. So we also asked how effective support orgs feel they are at integrating information about workforce and workplace initiatives into the literacy service planning process. So the same thing. I mean, in our area, we are lucky that Literacy Link South Central, and by extension, one of our local programs is significantly involved in some of the SAOs that are happening. Well, one in our case in particular, and we are doing, as Michael mentioned earlier, some of the pre and post assessments, right? But it's about flexibility. It's about being able to go in when those clients need you to, et cetera. But I see a lot more opportunity. And I like to write it up, not because I have tons of time on my hands and nothing to do with it, but it's because we need to make these linkages explicit for folks. Okay. And when I say folks, I mean decision makers. So again, we asked, how else do you support workforce and workplace literacy? Somebody mentioned helping programs negotiate with employers. So playing that broker role, co-hosting conferences. I think in the East, they have been particularly successful about developing conferences for LBS that have a specific focus. Using labor market information in all aspects of literacy service planning work. I know that a couple of my colleagues, Janine from the Literacy Network of Durham Region and Doug from Literacy Link Eastern Ontario are very good at this, and I plan on learning more from them this year so that I can get better at it. Launching an employer awareness campaign, working with planning boards to follow up with employers, we talked about that, and participating on workforce planning board committees. It's kind of that see and be seen, right? If nobody knows who you are, they're not going to come looking for you. And again, we recognize that most programs, if you're expected to be in the classroom, it's pretty hard for you to get out there and sit on all these committees. So that's something that here at Literacy Link, and I'm sure with the other support org colleagues on the call, that's one of the ways we try to support you guys. Okay, so one of the final questions is, how clear do you feel your support organization is on understanding the ministry's expectations of support organizations for workplace and workforce delivery? So this one made me giggle substantially. As you can see, 50% feel that they do understand the expectations, 35.7 somewhat understand, and 14.2, of which I'm sure I was one. When I responded, I said, no, I don't know exactly. We do a lot of stuff at Literacy Link South Central, but we do it because we see the need, not because we necessarily know that it's our ministry's expectation. So I would certainly appreciate a little bit more clarity around that. And we also asked the support orgs, what kind of information or professional development do you think you need? So it's interesting because I saw a lot of parallels here between what the support org said and what the literacy program said. So how do you market to employers? How do you use LMI strategically? The organizational needs assessment, certainly mentioned by programs as well. How do you work more closely with employment services and apprenticeship unions? Wouldn't it be nice if there was a central location for workforce and workplace tools and resources? And last but not least, wouldn't it be great if we had clear definitions and examples of both workforce and workplace literacy? Okay, so we're drawing to the end of our time together today, but I wanted to identify the other webinars in this series. I've already mentioned the November 18th webinar, which is What's Your Stake in Workplace and Workforce Literacy? After that, we'll have integrating labor market information into literacy service planning. We recognize that all programs don't do literacy service planning, but you're welcome to attend if you're just wanting to attend for interest's sake. But we do think that'll be primarily of interest to the support orgs. And last but not least, workforce planning boards and regional literacy networks. We've identified some of the reasons why literacy and basic skills and the planning boards can and should be supporting and are supporting each other's work, but we want to dig a little deeper, and that will happen on February 17th. So now it's time for some evaluation and for me to flex my technology skills. So I'm going to launch a poll that I would, well, two polls actually. I'll start with this one. Launch. So you should see a question pop up on your screen. Can somebody confirm if you are? Again, I'm kind of new at this.
Yes, it's there, Tamara.
Oh, yay. So I have this question and one more. So for those of you who are still with us, I'd really love it if you could answer both, and that would be amazing. And while you're doing that, I do want to take an opportunity to thank Shannon and Marianne for their tireless efforts in interpreting. I really appreciate it. And Stacy from Contact North, she had to leave earlier, just about 10 minutes ago. But again, it's hard to keep track of everything you want to keep track of when you're facilitating. So thanks to Stacy and thanks to Anne-Marie for helping me out. Okay, I think everybody has responded, so that's great. I just don't know if I can, making a quick note of the results, and then I'll launch the second question here. Here we go. Okay, do you see that one too, Anne-Marie?
Yes, I do.
Okay, perfect. So thanks everybody for helping us out by answering these questions. It's very useful for us. Does anybody have any final comments that you want to make before we wrap up today's webinar? Let me see.
Tamara, lots of thank yous in the chat for you. You've done a great job.
Well,
And I did the thank you.
thank you. Doug, I think I see your hand.
And I echo the same. Thank you very much. Well done. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks to all of you for taking time out of what I know is has there ever been an October quite like this? I'm not sure there has been.